Christmas coming up and Ruth Heaper bored by her grandfather sending her a whole portable TV. I head south to see my mother again. Ruth kisses me and loves me goodbye. On the way down, I plan to see Raphael at the home of Varnum Random, the poetry consultant at the Library of Congress. What a mess, but how funny. Even Varnum must remember it with horrified glee. A cab from the railroad station takes me out to the suburbs of Washington, D.C. I see the swell house with dim night lights and ring the doorbell. It's Raphael answers, saying, "You shouldn't be here, but I'm the one who told you I was here, so here you are." "Well, does Random mind?" "No, of course not, but he's asleep with his wife now." "Is there any booze?" "He has 2 beautiful grown daughters you'll see tomorrow. It's a real ball. It's not for you. We'll go to the zoo in his Mercedes-Benz." "You got pot." "Still got some from Mexico." So we turn on in the big empty piano living room, and Raphael sleeps on the living room couch so I can go down in the basement and sleep in the little draped cubicle couch the Randoms have arranged for him. Once down there, high on pot, I see tubes of oil paint and paper watercolor books, and paint me 2 pictures before I sleep: the angel and the cat. And in the morning, I see the real horror of it all. In fact, I added to the horror by my really importunate presence, but I wanted to see Raphael. All I remember is that the incredible Raphael and incredible me were really imposing on this gentle and quiet family, the head of which, Varnum, a bearded, kindly Jesuit, I guess, bore everything with a manly, aristocratic grace, as I was to do later. But Varnum really knew that Raphael was a great poet and drove him off that afternoon to a cocktail party in Cleopatra's Needle, while I wheedled in the living room writing poems and talking to the youngest daughter, 14, and the oldest, 18, and wondering where the Jack Daniels bourbon of the house was hidden, which I got to later. There's Varnum Random, the great American poet, watching the Mud Bowl on TV over his London literary supplement. Jesuits always seem to be interested in football. He shows me his poems, which are as beautiful as Merton's and as technical as Lowell's. Schools of writing limit men, even me. If there were anything somber about holy airplanes during the war, I would add the last dark touch. If everybody in the world, when they dream of roosters, died, as Hsai Ann said, everybody would be dead at sunrise in Mexico, Burma, and the world. And Indiana. But no such thing happens in the real world, not even in Montmartre, when Apollinaire climbs the hill by the pile of bricks to get his drunken room, as winds of February blow. Bless the ride. And there's insane Raphael with a huge nail and a huge hammer actually banging into the smartly decorated wall so he can hang his oil on wood painting of Michelangelo's David. I see the housewife wince. Raphael apparently thinks that painting will be held and revered there on the wall forever, right by the Baldwin grand piano and the Tang tapestry. Furthermore, he then asks for breakfast. I figure I'd better get going. But Varnum Random actually asked me to stay one more day, so I spend the whole afternoon writing poems high on Benny in the parlor, and I call them the Washington, D.C. Blues. Random and Urso argue with me about my theory of absolute spontaneity. In the kitchen, Random takes out the Jack Daniels and says, "How can you get any refined or well-gestated thoughts into a spontaneous flow, as you call it? They can all end up gibberish." And that was no Harvard lie. But I said, if it's gibberish, it's gibberish. There's a certain amount of control going on, like a man telling a story in a bar, without interruptions or even one pause. Well, it'll probably become a popular gimmick, but I prefer to look upon my poetry as a craft. Craft is craft. Yes, meaning? Meaning crafty. How can you confess your crafty soul in craft? Raphael took Random's side and yelled, "Shelley didn't care about theories about how he was to write the Skylark. Deluos, you're full of theories like an old college professor. You think you know everything. You think you're the only one," he added to himself. Triumphantly, he swept off with Random in the Mercedes-Benz to meet Carl Sandburg or somebody. This was the great making it scene Irwin had crowed about. I yelled after them, If I had a poetry university, you know what would be written over the entrance arch?" "No, what?" "Here, learn that learning is ignorance. Gentlemen, don't burn my ears. Poetry is lamb dust. I prophesy it. I'll lead schools in exile. I don't care." They weren't bringing me to meet Carl Sandburg, whom I'd known anyway 7 years ago at several parties where he stood before the fireplace in a tuxedo and talked about freight trains in Illinois 1910, and actually threw his arms around me going, "Ha ha ha, you're just like me." Why am I saying all this? I felt forlorn and lost even when Raphael and I and Random's wife went to the zoo and I saw a female monkey giving the male monkey some skull, or as we call it in the Lower East Side, poontang. And I said, "Did you see them practicing fellatio?" The woman blushed and Raphael said, "Don't talk like that. Where'd they ever hear the word fellatio?" But we had one fine dinner downtown. Washingtonians stared to see the bearded man wearing my huge vicuña coat, which I gave Random in exchange for an Air Force fur-collared leather coat, to see the two pretty daughters with him, the elegant wife, the tousled, bedraggled black-haired Raphael carrying a Boito album and a Gabrielli album, and me in jeans, all coming in to sit at a back table for beer and chicken, in fact, all miraculously piling out of one tiny Mercedes-Benz. I foresaw a new dreariness in all this literary success. That night I called a cab to take me to the bus station and downed half a bottle of Jack Daniels. While waiting, sitting on a kitchen stool, sketching the pretty older daughter who was on her way to Sarah Lawrence College to learn all about Erich Fromm and the pots and pans. I gave her the sketch, rather accurate, thinking she'd keep it forever like Raphael's Michelangelo. But when we were both back in New York a month later, a big package came containing all our paintings and sketches and stray t-shirts, with no explanation, meaning "thank God you've gone." And I don't blame them. I still feel ashamed about that uninvited visit and haven't done such a thing since and never will. I got down to the bus station with my rucksack and foolishly, high on Jack Daniels, began talking to some sailors who then got a guy with a car to drive out to the back streets of Washington in search of an after-hours bottle. A Negro connection was dickering with us when up walked a Negro cop who wanted to search us all but was outnumbered. I simply walked away with my rucksack on my back to the station, got on the bus and fell asleep with the pack by the driver's well. When I woke up in Roanoke Rapids at dawn, it was gone. Somebody had taken it off at Richmond. I let my head fall on the seat in that harsh glare, nowhere worse in the world than in America with a stupid, guilty hangover. A whole new novel, Angels of Desolation, a whole book of poetry, and the finishing chapters of another novel about Tristessa, together with all the paintings, not to mention the only gear I had in the world, sleeping bag, poncho, sweater of holy favor, perfect simple equipments, the result of years thinking, gone, all gone. I started to cry. And I looked up and saw the bleak pines by the bleak mills of Roanoke Rapids with one final despair, like the despair of a man who has nothing left to do but leave the earth forever. Soldiers waited for the bus smoking, fat old North Carolinians watched hands back clasped. Sunday morning I empty of my little tricks to make life livable. An empty orphan sitting nowhere, sick and crying. Like dying, I saw all the years flash by, all the efforts my father had made to make living something to be interested about, but only ending in death. Blank death in the glare of automobile day, automobile cemeteries, whole parking lots of cemeteries everywhere. I saw the glum faces of my mother, of Erwin, of Julian, of Ruth, all trying to make it, to go on believing without hope. Gay college students in the back of the bus, making me even sicker to think of their purple plans, all in time to end blind in an automobile cemetery insurance office for nothing. Where's yonder old mule buried in those piney barrens, or did the buzzard just eat? Caca, all the world caca. I remember the enormous despair of when I was 24, sitting in my mother's house all day while she worked in the shoe factory. In fact, sitting in my father's death chair, staring like a bust of Goethe at nothing, getting up once in a while to plunk sonatas on the piano, sonatas of my own spontaneous invention, then falling on the bed crying, looking out the window at the glare of automobiles on Cross Bay Boulevard, bending my head over my first novel, too sick to go on, wondering about Goldsmith and Johnson, how they burped sorrow by their firesides in a life that was too long. That's what my father told me the night before he died. Life is too long. So wondering if God is a personal God who's actually personally concerned about what happens to us, every one, putting us up to burdens, to time, to the crying horror of birth and the impossible lostness of the promise of death. And why? Because we're fallen angels who said in heaven, heaven is great, it better be anyway, and off we fell. But do you or do I remember doing such a thing? All I remember is that before I was born, there was bliss. I actually remember the dark swarming bliss of 1917, although I was born in 1922. New Year's Eves came and went, and I was just blisshood. But when I was dragged out of my mother's womb, a blue baby, they yelled at me to wake up and slapped me, and ever since then I've been chastised and lost for good and all. Nobody slapped me in bliss. Is God everything? If God is everything, then it's God who slapped me. For personal reasons, do I have to carry this body around and call it mine own? Yet in Raleigh, a tall, blue-eyed southerner told me my bag was being shipped to my destination station in Winter Park. God bless you, I said, and he did a calm double take. As for my mother, there's no other like her in the world, really. Did she bear me just to have a little child to bless her heart? She got her wish. At this time, she was retired from a lifetime, beginning at 14, of shoe skiving in shoe factories of New England and later New York, was collecting her Social Security pittance, and living with my married sister as a kind of housemaid, though she didn't mind doing the housework at all, natural to her. A neat French-Canadian born in St. Pacôme in 1895 while her pregnant mother was visiting Canada from New Hampshire. She was born a twin, but the gleeful, fleshy little twin died. Oh, what would she have been like? And the mother died too. So my mother's position in the world was immediately cut off. Then her father died at 38. She was housemaid for aunts and uncles till she met my father, who was infuriated at the way she was being treated. My father dead, and I a bum, she was housemaid for relatives again, though in her prime, wartime New York, she used to make $120 a week sometimes at the shoe factories on Canal Street and in Brooklyn. Those times when I was too sick or sad to be on my own with wives and friends and I came home. She totally supported me while I, however, wrote my books with no real hope of ever having them published, just an artist. In 1949, I earned about $1,000 on my first novel, Advance. But that never went far, so now she was at my sister's. You saw her in the door, in the yard, emptying the garbage, at the stove, making roasts, at the sink, washing dishes, at the ironing board, at the vacuum cleaner, all gleeful anyway. A suspicious paranoid who told me Irwin and Julian were devils and would ruin me, probably true. She nevertheless was gleeful as a child most of the time. Everybody loved her. The only time my father ever had any cause to complain about this pleasant peasant woman was when she'd let him have it full blast for losing all his money gambling. When the old man died, age 57, he said to her, "So, ma mère," as my nephew now called her, short for grandmamère. "Angie, I never realized what a great woman you are. Will you ever forgive me for all the wrong things I've done, like those times I was away for days and the money I lost gambling? The few pitiful dollars I could have spent on you with some silly hat?" "Yes, Emil, but you always gave us the house money for food and rent." "Yes, but I lost a lot more than that on the horses and playing cards and money I gave away to a lot of bums. But now that I'm dying, I guess, and here you are working in the shoe factory and Jackie's here to take care of me and I ain't worth it. Now I realize what I lost all those years." One night he said he wished he had real old good Chinese food, so ma mère gave me $5 and had me ride the subway all the way from Ozone Park to Chinatown, New York, to buy Chinese food in cartons and bring it back. Pa ate every bit of it but threw up. Cancer of the liver. When we buried him, she insisted on an expensive coffin, which made me so goddamn mad. But not only that, though I wasn't mad on that score, she had his old sweet body ambulated to New Hampshire for funeral and burial there by the side of his first son, Gerard, my holy brother. So now as thunder breaks in Mexico City, where I write, they're still there, side by side, 35 and 15 years there in the earth. But I never revisited their graves, knowing that what's there is not really Papa Emil or Gerard, only dung. For if the soul can't escape the body, give the world to Mao Zedong. I I know better than that. God must be a personal God because I've known a lot of things that weren't in texts. In fact, when I went to Columbia, all they were trying to teach us was Marx, as if I cared. I cut classes and stayed in my room and slept in the arms of God. This is what the dialectical materialists call cherubim tendencies, or the psychiatrists call schizoid tendencies. Ask my brother and my father in their graves about tendencies. I see them tending towards the golden eternity where all is restored again forever, where actually whatever you loved is all compacted in one essence, the only one. Now Christmas Eve, we all sat around drinking martinis in front of the TV. Poor little sweet Davy, the gray cat who used to follow me into the North Carolina woods when I went there to meditate with the dogs, who therefore used to hide above my head in the tree, once throwing down a twig or leaf to make me notice him. He was now a ragged cat taken to carousal and fights and even got bitten by a snake. I tried to sit him on my lap, but he didn't remember anymore. Actually, my brother-in-law kept throwing him out the door. Old Bob the dog, who used to lead me through the woods down midnight paths, shining white somehow. He was now dead. I think Davy missed him. I took out my sketchbook and sketched Ma as she dozed in her chair during midnight mass from New York. When I later showed the picture to a girlfriend in New York, she said it looked very medieval. The strong arms, the stern sleeping face, the repose and faith. Once I took home 5 tea heads in Mexico City who were selling me pot, but they all turned out to be thieves, stealing my scout knife, flashlight, Marine and Noxema while my back was turned. Though I noticed it and said nothing, at one point the leader stood behind me as I sat, for a good 30 seconds of silence, during which time it occurred to me he was probably going to stab me with my own knife so they could search the apartment at leisure for my hidden money. I wasn't even scared, I just sat there not caring, high. When the thieves finally left at dawn, one of them insisted I give him my $50 raincoat. I said, "Non," distinctly, for sure, finally saying that my mother would kill me. Mi madre, pow, pantomiming a punch to my own chin. To which the strange leader said in English, "So you are afraid of something." On the porch of the house was my old roll-top desk with all the unpublished manuscripts in it and the couch where I slept. To sit at my old desk and stare was sad, all the work I'd done at it, 4 novels and innumerable dreams and poems and notes. It made me realize suddenly I was working as hard as any man in the world, so what did I have to reproach myself for, privately or otherwise? St. Paul wrote, Corinthians 8:10, "Therefore I write these things being absent, lest being present I should use sharpness according to the power which the Lord hath given me to edification and not to destruction." When I left after Mom made a huge delicious turkey dinner for New Year's Day, I told her I'd be back in the fall to move her out to a little house of her own, figuring I'd make enough money on the book that had just been accepted. She said, "Oui, Jean, I do want a little home of my own." Almost crying, and I kissed her goodbye. "Don't let those bums in New York talk you into anything," she added, because she was convinced that Irwin Garden was out to get me, as my father had predicted for some reason, saying, "Angie, tell Jack that Irwin Garden is going to try to destroy him someday, and that Hubbard, too. That Julian is all right, but Garden and Hubbard are going to destroy him." And it was weird to ignore it, since he'd said it just before he died in a quiet prophetic voice, as though I were some kind of important St. Paul or even a Jesus with 4 ordained Judases and enemies in the kingdom of heaven. "Stay away from them. Stick to your little girlfriend." "Who sent you the cigars?" yelled my mom, meaning the box of cigars Ruth Keeper had mailed me for Christmas. "They'll destroy you if you let them. I don't like the funny look in their face." Yet strangely, I was on my way back to New York to borrow $225 from Irwin so I could sail to Tangiers, Morocco, to visit with Hubbard. Wow. And meanwhile in New York, in fact, Irwin and Raphael and Ruth Heeper posed for sinister photos in the Ruth apartment, showing Irwin in a black turtleneck sweater, Raphael in an evil cap, obviously making love to Ruth, and Ruth herself in her pajamas. Raphael was always making time with my girls. Unfortunately, my pod never known it. On the train to New York, I saw a pregnant woman pushing a baby carriage in front of a cemetery. That's a poem. The first thing on tap as I unpacked in Ruth Heeper's bedroom was Life magazine was going to take all our pictures in Gerard Rose's print and frame shop in Greenwich Village, arranged by Irwin. Gerard Rose had never liked me and didn't like this whole idea at all. Gerard was the original cool subterranean who was so bugged, so listless, yet so good-looking like Gerard Philippe, yet so down, so bored, that when Hubbard met him, he said this to me in comment on Gerard. I can just picture Gerard and me sitting in a bar when the Mongols invade New York. Gerard's leaning his head on his hand saying, "Tartars everywhere." But I liked Gerard, of course, and when I finally published my book that fall, he yelled, "Ho ho, the playboy of the beat generation. Want to buy a Mercedes?" As if I could afford it then or now. So for the Life photographers, I drank up, got high, combed my hair, and had them shoot me standing on my head. Tell everybody this is the way to keep the doctor away. They didn't even smile. They took other photos of Raphael and Irwin and Simon and me sitting on the floor, interviewed us and wrote notes, went away inviting us to a party, and never even published the pictures or the story. There's the saying around the trade that the cutting room floor of Life magazine is cluttered a foot deep with lost faces, or the face on the cutting room floor. It wasn't about to destroy my potentiality as an artist, a writer, but it was an awful waste of energy and, in a way, a grisly joke. Meanwhile, we went to the party indicated and heard a man in a Brooks Brothers jacket say, "Who wants to be a party pooper after all?" The moment we heard the word pooper, we all left. Something somehow wrong with it, like the farts of summer camp counselors.